Hey everybody, how's it going? I'm Chase Jarvis. It's my job to welcome you to another episode of the Chase Jarvis Live Show here on CreativeLive. This show is where I sit down with the world's top creators, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders and do my very best to unpack actionable and valuable insights with the goal of helping you live your dreams in career and hobby and in life. My guest today is a hyphen like all of us. He's an entrepreneur where he founded Behance way back in 2006, I think, sold that to Adobe. He's got a new startup we're going to talk about called Prefer. He's an investor, a venture partner with Benchmark, which is an amazing firm here in San Francisco, and he's the best-selling author of the book, Making Ideas Happen. My guest is the Scott Belsky.
Thanks, Chase.
How'd that do?
Hey.
Is that it?
It works.
Does that sum you up?
I like the hyphens.
Hyphens. We're all a bunch of hyphens. Welcome to the show. It's been a long time in the making.
Thanks for having me.
I'm super happy that you're here. What are you working on right now? I mean, we'll unpack that little intro.
Sure.
But you got a new thing?
Yeah. So a few different projects right now.
Okay.
One is a new business that I am a co-founder of, and my co-founder in the business is the CEO.
Got it.
And it's a company that is really challenging the norms these days around how labor is partaking in on-demand marketplaces and online marketplaces and bidding marketplaces, and we're kind of looking at all of these skilled, relationship-driven service professionals, people that would ideally find a client through a referral rather than online somewhere.
Oh, I take so much pride in referring friends to I've got the best, if you're a creator and you want a bookkeeper or an accountant, I'm freakish about this person.
Listen, I mean, I think that most people say that they would prefer to find a professional they need in their lives through a referral, and also the service professionals. Also, whether they're a massage therapist, a babysitter, an accountant, a chef, whatever, they also prefer referrals over anyone else.
Right.
And so it's if both sides of this market prefer to find each other, through this kind of trusted, relationship-driven way, why are there all these multi-billion-dollar companies that are there to basically commoditize labor, to match based on proximity or price or 3.5 stars from strangers rather than connecting based on relationships. And so what this company is doing, aptly named Prefer,
there you go.
Prefer.com, it's simple, is to try to help us see the professionals our friends use, and then helping service professionals build their business on their own terms, using their own brand to find clients through their clients' friends.
It's so smart. It's so simple. I take a huge amount of pride in who I recommend and who I run around with, such that, most of the people I was like, wow, if you can get in to see my hairstylist, don't judge. But if you can get in to see, he's an amazing guy, XYZ. I think there's an element of cultural capital in being able to recommend.
Absolutely, and context matters, by the way, because you would want to use the hairstylist of some friends and not others.
For sure.
And also, I mean, if you're looking for a photographer or for someone else, and it's one thing to just say I need the closest photographer, but really, I mean, you want to figure out. If you're hiring someone for a fashion shoot, you would trust the judgment of someone who's in that industry over someone who just hired them for a wedding or something. So it's exciting. I mean, listen, it's an early stage business.
Yeah.
There's a lot to figure out. I do believe, though, that eventually there will be a company that makes commerce, like local commerce with people, professionals, a little bit more akin to what it was like in a small town back in the day.
Yeah.
Where you'd work with who your friends and neighbors
you got to go see Freddie.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's been a trend, I think, for me in my own career, is looking at ways that technology hurts rather than helps people and trying to invert it. I mean, if you think back to Behance, Behance was founded at a time when there were all these design spec contests that were trying to get creatives to do work for free.
Yeah.
And creatives would also never get attribution for the work that they did. You never really know who actually did a campaign or shot a photo or retouched it or did the typography or whatever.
Yep.
And so the idea of fostering attribution in the creative world was really about Behance, or what was our mission back then. And now similarly with Prefer, it's kind of helping empower these relationship-driven professionals to retain their pricing power, work on their own terms rather than subjugating themselves to some on-demand platform.
Great. Well, that's one of the reasons I wanted to open with Prefer. I know it's new. And it also requires that in order for it to be successful, it requires people be on the platform, right? It
does, yes.
But that's a big ask. But that's one of the reasons I want, if you're at home, it is an incredible service. It's something that I would provide, or I would find that would provide an insane amount of value. So we're planting the seeds there. But you already did the hard work, because I was just about to tie that back to a thread.
I jumped in real quickly.
No, but you're good at this.
Yeah,
you're a professional. Like that, the thread in your work about, you use the word attribution for creators. This is connecting people. And I think if my understanding of Behance is the place for folks to showcase and discover talent. Is that still, is that the way you think about it? And you can see and smell the similarities to Prefer, but this is just focused specifically on creators.
Yep.
So take us back to 2006.
Back to 2006.
Actually, maybe before.
Yeah.
So I think that's actually, this is worth noting. Speaking of, in your intro, I talked about all this being hyphens. You started at Goldman.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you laugh. So why is that funny to you?
You know, so undergrad in college, I was a business major and basically minored in design. I took all the design classes in the Human Ecology College at Cornell, and so I was always kind of in between the two, you know, and at Goldman, my only finance job that I took there was a year and a half, and then I rotated to another job in the organization focused on kind of organizational improvement and succession planning and stuff like that, where I actually was using Adobe Illustrator to express, you know, ideas and to help the firm do a lot of this planning and visualization.
Got it.
And I remember trying to request a version of Adobe Illustrator for my computer in Goldman Sachs. People being like, "What? Like, what? Why?" So design was always like kind of core to how I approached my work. And Behance was really born out of frustration with just a lot of my friends who were in the creative community who were always struggling to get their career to be productive. And they were always saying, gosh, you know, I'm always kind of struggling to make it, and yet I'm so talented. And I kind of got frustrated with this. It was like, well, stop working for agencies that work for agencies, that work for, you know, headhunters that work for agencies. You know, start working for yourself. Take your career, you know, take the reins on your own career. So Behance was founded with this mission to organize the creative world. And I remember telling people that, and people being like, oh, you know, good luck with that.
That's right.
But it was, we had a focus group early 2006, the first and only focus group we ever had at the company, where we pitched all of the different things we were doing. We made these paper products at the time. We had an online task management and project management application called Action Method. We had a conference, and we still have a conference called the 99U Conference,
Incredible.
which is ninth year this year. And we also were developing this idea for portfolio display online. And we asked people, you know, what they thought of these ideas. And I was looking I moved recently, and I was looking at all like this old paperwork, and I came across these surveys. It's funny, just a few weeks ago. And unanimously people were like, well, don't do the community. They were like, we have MySpace, we have Facebook, we have all these different places. Like the last thing we need is yet another place to like connect and whatever. But when we asked people what they were struggling with, they were saying, well, my portfolio is always outdated. No one can find me in the world of Google. You know, in terms of like photographer New York, you're not going to find, you know, one particular person's website necessarily. Yeah. They always felt like they were at the mercy of these middlemen. They hated spec contests. They never got attribution for their work. These are the things that we were hearing. Yep. And so we were like, wow, so you're telling us that the last thing you want is another creative community. Yet everything you're telling us suggests to us that there is a new type of creative community that should be created. And so that was actually the birth of Behance. Oh, wow. And it was also a major lesson to me, which was, you know, understanding the differences between what your customers say that they want and what they really need, and asking the right questions and not relying on focus groups. But that's another story.
The one and only focus group.
Yeah, so that was, and then it was 5 years of bootstrapping this business. It was painful. We had multiple near-death experiences. And then a little less than 2 years at being a venture-backed company. And then when Adobe was shifting to their Creative Cloud model, you know, away from like this old stodgy packaged software business into more of a, you know, relationship-driven business with their customers, they realized that they needed a community. I mean, they needed a way to understand what the customer's creating on a daily basis and staying connected with them. And so that's when, you know, we became part of Adobe at the end of 2012. And I have to tell you, like, everyone talks about these unicorns in the tech industry. I think a true unicorn is an acquisition that actually works. Yeah. Because that seldom happens. You know, usually, like the company, the team just disbands and the mission's gone and whatever. You know, but 4 years later, the team is largely still together. Yeah. And it's pretty remarkable to see the continued evolution of Behance.
Well, so the backstory, fascinating. You mentioned in there, again, you're very good at your job. You dropped a bunch of nuggets in there. I got to go back and visit. So
Sure.
multiple near-death experiences. And so this is for the folks at home who are like, whether you're starting a company like Scott or as an independent artist, you're going to have all kinds of near-death experiences where you almost miss your rent payments and you realize that student debt's got you down and you have to change careers because X, Y, Z. In the startup world, when you've got other employees and you've got payroll on a much grander scale than just yourself looking after yourself, what are some of those near-death experiences? Recap some of those things.
Yeah, I remember we had a office manager, Brittany, who was sitting in my office, in this little space we had on Broadway in New York, and she was basically saying, we're 2.5 months away from basically not being able to make salaries. And I was like, well, let's review expenses again. Like, what are we doing? What can we push off? And let's rethink like the hiring plan. Like, do we really want to bring anyone else on right now? And I'll tell you though that conversations like that developed this sense of resourcefulness that I believe was more valuable to us than resources. This ability to say, all right, let's really hear, like, what do our customers need now that they're willing to pay for? Let's stop investing in things that we're not even sure they're willing to pay for.
Yeah.
Let's also think about, how can we be more resourceful in how we're working and how we're measuring ourselves, and in anything superfluous that we're doing, let's stop. I mean, it gave us this feeling of the granularity of our business, of what we were creating and what our customers wanted, that I think you lose when you have too many resources and you don't have to do it.
Yeah.
And so I think it made us a stronger business. It was a near-death experience because any little whim, in the economy or in our team or whatever could have killed us, right? And it's always tricky because when entrepreneurs ask me now, wow, you bootstrapped for 5 years and you were always kind of teetering at the brink of not being break even, would you recommend that to me? Because it sounds, in retrospect, like, oh, like we actually retained a majority ownership of our business. We didn't have to dilute ourselves too much with too much venture capital. But I don't think I'd recommend it to anyone because it's almost like one of those things, like what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. But I don't know, like how many things should you do that almost kill you? It's not necessarily wise. So I think those are some of the things that come to mind. The other thing I would say is the benefits of loyalty, in a team. And I was always very transparent with the team. And like, here's where we're at.
Yeah.
Because I knew all these people would get better, more lucrative offers elsewhere. And I knew that the long-term vision of what we were hoping to achieve wasn't enough to motivate us every day to work under these conditions. I kind of had to say, this is the truth. This is where we're at. Let's like persevere. Let's roll up our sleeves, and for like one moment in our lives, let's just kind of stick with it and believe. And there were a lot of those conversations in those years that I think made us stronger. But again, it was always teetering at the point.
Well, I love access. Access is a core value of CreativeLive. I love access to, not just for the creators to have access to world-class experts, but the way we talk about it internally is radical transparency.
Yeah.
Anyone in the company can put a meeting on my calendar.
Yep.
And I'm happy to take it. How important do you think that is for not just building culture in a company, but for an individual? Because so many people who are listening are solopreneurs, are creators trying to get off the ground, or the way we talk about it here is go from 0 to 1, get off the ground, or 1 to 10.
Yep.
And how important is transparency with a creator and one's audience? How do you think about that?
And also with ourselves.
Yeah.
I've always believed that the greatest competitive advantage in business is self-awareness. When you're at the peaks and everything's going really well, you tend to feel infallible. You tend to feel, unpenetrable. You don't want to listen to anything. Like you think you're right more than you should be thinking you're right. And so in that instance, that's where kind of a lack of self-awareness helps your competitors just leapfrog you.
Yeah.
And that's really where incumbents die, right?
Yep.
It's because they stop being self-aware of what's going on around them. And then when you're in the valleys as opposed to the peaks, this is where like your darknesses rear their head. And this is where the team, the worst comes out in everybody. The self-doubts that we have, and the struggles. And it's where we start to have to realize that, like Carl Jung says, everything that irritates us about others is a window into our soul. We have to start to ask ourselves, like, why is everything bothering me? What's really going on? Why is so-and-so working out? Like, how do I make sense of this behavior? So I think that the investment in self-awareness, which I think in part is transparency, is having an environment where people can speak up, challenge each other. One of the things I do remember from the early days that accompanies transparency, I believe, is fighting. If everyone kind of knows what's going on and everyone has a strong opinion and everyone's empowered to speak, you're going to get disagreement.
Yeah.
And we had very big kind of all outs,
knock down, drag out.
Yeah, and we never ended a day without sharing conviction.
Yeah.
But we also never held back in expressing and defending and advocating for our views. And so I believe that was helpful in keeping everyone engaged, keeping everyone honest. No one would ever. The one thing I would always fight as a leader was apathy.
Yeah. To me, apathy, like cynicism.
Yep.
Apathy and cynicism are the things that I feel like I'm pretty tolerant as a leader. Those two things are like absolute poison. I got no tolerance for them.
And I agree with you, because skepticism is good.
Yeah.
But cynicism is dangerous.
Yeah.
And so I think that these are the nuances, I believe, of like leading one of those journeys. And it's it's very burdensome and all-encompassing, because you always feel like you're managing the immune system of your team, and you're always trying to sniff out any sort of infection, and you're trying to address it, and you're trying to bring everyone's kind of voices up front. And but it feels good when you have a startup or an early stage venture or project or anything, and if you really know and you're tuned into why you're reacting and why you're feeling the way you are, it's power.
So as long as we're going backwards, we're pulling on some threads throughout your career. Now we connected the role and the service that Behance provided for its community relative to one that you aspire to with Prefer. The thread that is also really prominent in your career, as far as I've known you for a few years now, and you can look back and connect some dots, is around the doing. Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty unashamed of saying 90% doing, 10% planning. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of folks, lists and all the planning gets in the way of the doing. So as it relates to your book, as it relates to a lot of the talks that you've given online and your philosophy, you've made a career out of helping others get shit done.
Yeah.
So was that intentional? Is that a personal aspiration of yours? Is it just an opportunity that you saw to help add value? What's the framework for how we should think about your role in helping people make ideas happen?
Well, I think that it's specific to the creative community. I was always very frustrated by how many ideas there are and how much thirst there is for more creativity, when in fact what a lot of us need, a lot of people watching this, I believe, in the creative world need, is just is fewer ideas and more organization around the ones they've already got.
Yeah.
I think that actually execution and organization are some of those forces that just propel us forward way more so than more planning. I love the Herb Keller quote from Southwest Airlines that I have a strategic plan. It's called doing things. And there's something beautiful about that. It's just kind of the more you do, as long as you're honest with yourself, the more you're learning what's working, what's not working, the more you're optimizing, doing more of what works and less of what doesn't. And you're just also, I think that action begets action.
Yeah.
When you feel like you're making progress and your team feels like they're making progress, you make more progress, which is also one reason why, as a leader of a creative team, you need to merchandise the progress that you're making to your people.
Ooh, break that down.
They actually everyone has to see that you're making progress as a team. And it just doesn't, it's not as logical as it may seem, because day to day, oftentimes it doesn't feel like we're moving the ball forward.
Yeah.
There's still a lot of churn and back and forth and sunk costs and trying things, whatever. And the traditional metrics of progress, like more revenue, more customers, more clients, or whatever it is for you, those measures are not always available to us. And they're actually not always even there, especially when you're starting out on a bold project that doesn't even it hasn't even launched yet, doesn't have any customers. And so you kind of have to manufacture your own metrics in between. And then when you do that, what could this actually mean? It could mean printing out all of the tasks that are being completed for yourself or your team and putting them up on the wall, just to see that like you're actually making progress.
Done.
Yeah, like I mean, the idea of a to-do list where when you check something off, it disappears seems masochistic to me. It's like
you want to see the line through that.
Of course you do, and it's our psychology.
Yeah.
Like we have to feel like we're making progress in order to continue making progress. It's one of those things that I came across amongst a lot of other things when I was writing Making Ideas Happen. I was going to all these especially productive creative teams that consistently defy the odds again and again and make ideas happen, whereas most of us just have ideas and then more ideas and then more ideas and then more ideas and just try to stay afloat. And what a lot of those teams, one of those things that a lot of those teams did is they would, first of all, they had a bias towards action. So everything was always like capturing things that start with a verb. They would, if they left meetings that had nothing actionable coming out of them, they would just cancel the meetings going forward. They would measure the value of their meetings in actionable steps. They would have a culture of their team where if they were talking and someone said something, oh, I'll do this, but they didn't write it down, that they could say, did you capture that? It was little things like that just kind of kept the ball moving forward, and kept people feeling like they were making progress.
So that is super easy to see from the lens of an organization, like action items, takeaways from the meeting, whatnot. How do you, I don't know, maybe even prescribe is the right word. Maybe we can get tactical for a second because there's so many good. I mean, the book is awesome, especially if they're like most folks who are in the space that we're talking about. That's where they struggle. There's plenty of creativity, but the constraints, and you put a few things in there, and it can often paralyze people. So it's easy for me to extrapolate, and I think maybe some of the folks who are listening or watching. But let's get tactical for a second. Like, how should a creator measure their day to day? Is it literally having a list and being able to, keep one mega list so you can feel good about what's crossed off? Like you've studied groups, but you've also studied individuals. So.
Well, I think it starts with, first of all, it starts with this bias towards action in everything you do. So I don't care what tools you use or what paper products or what pens or whatever neurotic system everyone uses, to feel like they're engaged with their work and that they love the way of tracking and managing, which is important. But whatever it is, having this bias towards capturing things that start with verbs and making sure that they're done is the first step. The second thing is around prioritization. If you take all of the projects that are going on in your life right now and you place them along this kind of imaginary energy line, I would call it, starting at idle and then low, medium, high, all the way to extreme, and you were to place your projects along that energy line in terms of how much energy you should be allocating to each project and the tasks associated with each one. When you do this sort of exercise, the first thing you'll typically realize is that there are too many projects on the medium, high, and extreme side. It's very hard to determine like which ones deserve low or idle, no energy at all. It's sort of the equivalent of going to a computer, opening up every single application at once and then wondering why it's so damn slow, right? It's just because the RAM, can't keep up with the demand. So forcing yourself to put some of those things on the medium, low, and idle side of the spectrum. By doing so, empowers you in the morning when you have the most energy to over-index on the things that are on the high end in exchange for missing deadlines or falling behind on the things that are on the medium, low, and idle side of the equation. So it's important to do that kind of either a physical thing, like you make an energy line for yourself, so you just visually always know, like, where should I be pushing energy right now?
Yeah.
And then with your team, if you do this, what you'll realize is that people have the projects you're collectively working on at different places along the energy line. There's a misalignment among the folks you work with as to where the energy should be spent. And I actually believe that that's why deadlines are missed in the world. It's not because people don't care.
Interesting.
It's because people aren't aligned on where the energy should be spent at any given point. And you as the leader, if you tell your team, hey, these are the things you can miss a deadline on, in exchange for making sure that you meet or beat a deadline on these other things, on the high and extreme side of the line. So that's like another trick, maybe, or tactic to making sure that your energy is being spent wisely.
so smart. And I think the alignment part, I'm just looking backwards at some recent meetings here at CreativeLive, and I think the meetings, the big boulders, the big rocks that we want to move, the ones where we are all very clearly aligned, they move so much more smoothly than, that's really...
And all the little things.
Yeah.
100%.
But I think being clear about what is important to you is, the step 2 in your world is the prioritization.
And the leader is organizer. I mean, it's important to point out that oftentimes in the creative world especially, agencies or small design firms or small practices are founded by a creative.
Yeah.
And then oftentimes, the creative's litmus test for hiring other people is, would I want to have a beer with this person? Are they fun? Are they creative like me? Are they, and can they riff? Can they brainstorm and whatever? And when you hire this like team of creatives, it becomes this like intoxicated orgy of idea generation, and nothing ever gets done. And so it's so important. You got to have like these sober monitors, you can call them or whatever, but these people that can keep you on point and can call you on a lot of this stuff.
Do you see what of those roles do you see yourself in? Because you clearly are a creator. You've built, so many businesses, and we can talk about your investing and all that a little bit later. But do you put yourself in one camp or another?
I think I have another problem, which is there are those dreamers, like the creatives, the doers who are sort of like always like what's getting done, and then there are these like third type of people that I call the incrementalists who rotate from dreamer mode to doer mode. To dreamer mode to doer mode again and again and again. The problem with those people, like me, I believe, is that they risk not scaling any particular thing. If they don't have other people around them that are holding them accountable and making sure that there is enough sort of discovery and then enough execution before moving on to something else, that you're liable to just have a lot of things that are created but never really see their full potential. Which is why I've always believed I need a team around me. I really benefit from having other people I work with for that reason.
Is that so you've over-indexed on the scaled startup side because there is the bandwidth, the resources to have folks that are around you? Is that?
Yeah, and I think that if I were always kind of doing everything solo in isolation, I don't think I would, I would achieve something that's sustainable. Like Behance was a 10-year venture basically. And I hope that it's just like always a way for the creative community to showcase their work and connect. But I don't think it certainly would not have become what it was without the team holding us to it and rounding out my tendencies. So
I'm obsessed with doing.
Yep.
And maybe that's the bias for action you talk about that is an important characteristic especially for creators. It's not an accident that I married a producer. My wife is a producer, and she basically deserves all the credit for producing my career in photography. But what about tactically for those folks that are creators, yet especially solopreneurs or they're freelancers or indie folk, and you don't have that you talked about having a team. My wife Kate put together the team in my backstory, and then here at CreativeLive, I basically surround myself with operators who are talented and can make the trains run on time and get shit done. But having studied this for so long and written books on the topic, what about what's the medicine? What's the aspirin for the individual creator?
I think that it's somewhat controversial because
I love it. Bring it.
I think that there is the theme I've seen across the individual creative practitioners that are especially productive is that they have accepted what I like to call the creative's compromise, which is essentially, compromising some aspect of your natural creative tendencies to always come up with something new, to always be dreaming, to always be pushing that frontier of imagination, in exchange for a discipline of organization that is not natural to them. Something that feels synthetic and not completely native. And it's like a discipline that people take on, recognizing that they are in fact compromising, some aspect of their natural tendencies, in order to produce, in order to make. And It's hard to do alone, which is why I think people either marry a producer or someone who's an organizer
Well, that's the
or
importance,
whatever.
underscores the importance of community, who
Totally.
you surround yourself with,
Yeah.
whether it's Behance or here at CreativeLive. Or
I just don't think that the myth of the lone creative genius is just that.
Yeah, it's a myth.
It's a myth because so many great ideas will be conceived and die in the minds of creatives who just never got their shit together. And I think we need to challenge ourselves to adopt that discipline, again, at the expense of like some of our creative whims.
Yeah.
As well as surround ourselves with people that hold us accountable. What does that mean? It means sharing ideas liberally before they're ready to be shared, which is sort of like a shocking thing to a creative professional that cares so much about the polish and sending the message exactly when it's ready and not a moment too soon. But on the contrary, what I hear from a lot of great entrepreneurs and artists is that when they share their work prematurely, they benefit from the accountability and the feedback and the dots being connected by people around them, and that those benefits outweigh the costs of someone potentially stealing the idea, or of just them feeling like they kind of violated their creative ethos of not sharing it until it's ready.
Right. Well, along that sort of the paradigm that you were just discussing, where you've got, what are some of the violations that you see, or the again, having studied this, having lived it yourself, what are a lot of the myths and the lies that we tell ourselves that perpetuate our biggest challenges? You talked about sharing ideas before it's too soon, and about structure. But what are some other I'm trying to help folks at home be self-aware. Like, give them the Scott Belsky filter. So you have a problem if give us a handful of things that you saw consistently through your time at Behance and now as a leader in other organizations. Like, what are the ways that people get tripped up?
Well, I think that organization is not a badge of honor. Disorganization is not a badge of honor in the creative world, even though sometimes we tell ourselves that, this is part of my gift. That's bullshit.
That's bullshit.
It is overcoming that and realizing that we all have to give something up in order to make any particular idea see the light of day.
I used to think that the schedules were there, like that was part of the man's constraint to keep me down.
Right.
And then you start applying some rigor to a schedule, and it's like a catapult. It's like it focuses you, it limits your, it provides some creative constraints.
Yep.
Time is one of the most easily created. A deadline is something you can create for yourself to motivate work.
And if you're not being given these constraints, like a deadline or even a budget, seek them. I mean, honestly, one of the most, when I ask creative teams, like, what are the worst projects you've ever had, or what did things go completely awry? I have often heard it was when a client came and said, no budget, just like do whatever, like think big. I don't want you to be constrained. Is that ended up poorly, turning out badly. Right. It's kind of like we need constraints and we're not being given them. We need to seek them, which is somewhat counterintuitive to the natural creative tendency to be like, oh no, I want to have a client who just says whatever, and let me just be creative. That's a myth in itself. I think the belief that we can do it alone, or that we don't need the help around us as much as we actually do. I think there's a myth or a stigma around self-marketing in the creative world, where we tell ourselves we shouldn't be marketing ourselves, when in fact you must. The tragedy of talent is when no one knows what you're capable of because you're not telling them. Now, there are shameless ways and non-shameless ways to do it. I think one of the best non-shameless ways to do it is to be a curator of what's interesting to you, so that you're always sharing and pushing out things that you find interesting that folks in your industry, potential clients or whoever, are engaging with and sharing. And so they're tuned in. So whenever you have something new you want to do, they're already listening.
Yeah.
Another myth is that there are no competitors in the creative world, that we're all just kind of like peers, and competition is a dirty word. I've seen so many examples. I mean, one of my favorite ones was Noah Kalina, Brooklyn-based photographer. For whatever 15, 20 years, he has now been shooting a photograph of himself every single day. And many, many years ago, he was doing this maybe for only 5 years at that point. This is the early days of YouTube, for context, this. Right? And he's sort of a struggling photographer, I believe at the time, kind of shooting to put like bread on the table type of stuff.
Yeah.
And And he, about 5 years into this, shooting a photograph of himself every single day, and comes across like a story of another photographer, a woman who had been taking a photograph of herself every day for 2 years. And she's talking about how she's about to like debut this, in some sort of gallery or do something with it. And he's like, there's no way she's gonna beat me to the punch, And so in a matter of a week or so, he puts together this beautiful montage of every single photograph in rapid succession. He has his girlfriend at the time, this pianist, Carly Commando, like do this incredible, beautiful piece of music. And then he puts it up on YouTube, and it becomes one of the most viewed YouTube videos of all time. And he gets on the cover of these magazines and like morning shows and whatever else. And it was the perfect time, right, to just like get this thing done. This had been going on for 5 years with no one knowing about it really. And then the impetus to act and actually debut it to the world and build his career on it was competition.
Yeah.
Was tuning into what another photographer was doing, right? And so we have to pace ourselves with people around us. We have to recognize that none of us are above the need for an impetus to act on something. And that's another one of those myths that we need to overcome.
And that did, just my understanding of Noah's work, that did catapult him into a much more successful career than he was having before. It's one of those 5 or 10 year overnight success stories. Right. I think he shot Zuckerberg's wedding after that. There was a bunch of campaigns that he actually got aligned with. So, but isn't competition a dirty word? I mean, aren't we all just friends here to make cool shit?
Right. I think that's the myth.
Right.
I think that listen, competition it's less about wanting others to do poorly, and it's more about wanting yourself to do your best work ever.
Yeah, it's not a zero-sum game. That's the thing that I feel like
100%.
if someone, I encourage people to stop, you need to know, I equate it to flying. Like you need to know where the airport is, you know where the other planes are, but you're flying your own ship.
100%.
And it's so often people either obsess over something, like this other photographer, or completely ignore them, neither of which are effective.
Correct, right. Yeah. Neither of which are healthy.
Yeah.
It's probably something in between. You don't want to obsess over them because then you're going to end up looking like a poorer version of them. Mm-hmm. And you don't want to ignore them because you need them to motivate you. And you need, especially in the middle of the journey, we were talking about, the lack of metrics and proof that you're making progress.
Yeah.
It is helpful to have other forces, other people around you, the forces of competition, to just keep you doing, as you were saying. It's super important.
Yeah. So I think you covered most of the ones that I've heard you talk about publicly before. One of the ones I haven't heard you talk about is the psychology of the creator, self-talk. And presumably, leading creative teams, analyzing them, writing books about them.
Yeah.
I like to believe that the psychology is one of the key differentiators. It's like with sports, for example.
Totally.
The differentiator between the fastest race car driver and the second fastest race car driver, from a technical aspect, it's almost zero. It's hundredths of a second. But the psychology is dramatically different from the person who's on the podium every week to the person who's not.
Right.
With respect to creatives, how, A, what have you seen? B, what are some remedies or things that some advice from Scott Belsky?
Well, I think it kind of comes back a little bit to the competitive advantage of self-awareness. What I also think, though, and I always try to advise any teams or individuals that I know who are kind of embarking on very long journeys filled with ambiguity, uncertainty, doubt, self-doubt, and doubt from others, and is to first accept the fact that the motivation for your long-term vision, how you see yourself, which is very important, and it also is a great way to hire people and to decide yourself to kind of quit a job and do something you've always loved, right? But that long-term vision is not enough to motivate you on a daily basis. It is, it's a great North Star, it's a great hiring tactic, it's a great impetus to do something bold, but it is not enough to keep you engaged on a daily basis. And what you need to do on a daily basis is have a set of short-term rewards that we've basically, frankly, all been addicted to since birth. And it's it started with the parents' love, and gratification for something that we've done. It then became like the check on the test or the grade in the course, and then the salary every 2 weeks and the bonus at the end of the year. And I remember at one of our 99U conferences, venture capitalist from New York, Fred Wilson, made this comment that the two greatest addictions in life are heroin and a weekly salary, and how to unplug yourself from that salary, is to really unplug yourself from all of these short-term rewards that we kind of use to govern our behavior and keep us motivated, even when the thing we're trying to achieve is years and years away. So we have to realize that we're not above needing them, and we have to create them for ourselves. And so a big part of the psychology of any sort of long-term creative project is hacking your own reward system. It is creating some synthetic short-term rewards for yourself personally, like, could be as silly as I'm going to. I have so many stories. Like I remember one designer. She told me that she wrote a letter to her high school guidance counselor that basically said that she had ultimately become a failure and she had never done this and this and this and that. And she put it with his address and a stamp on it. And she said that if I don't achieve X, by next month, I'm going to mail this letter. And it was just so mortifying to her, like what would actually happen if she mailed this letter, and what she then would have to talk about with him, and like all this weird stuff that would be ramifications of that action. But it was her own little hack to get herself to like accomplish something over the course of the next month. With Behance, the story I like to tell is how whenever we typed in Behance into Google, it always said, "Do you mean enhance? Do you mean enhance? Do you mean enhance?" It was like, early on, the plea to the team was, we will someday no longer be a mistake. Like if we get enough portfolios out there, enough blog posts published, enough link back love from Google, we will no longer be an SEO mishap. And then lo and behold, like eventually, we typed in Behance into Google, and this is now, a more like sub 1 year project, like more like months rather than years. And Google knew who we were, and then actually, I kid you not, Beyonce became popular like a year later, and we were back to where we started again. So these like little short-term hacks are like so important as a way to keep your team engaged and keep yourself engaged. And so you have to become a designer of those hacks, just to keep yourself engaged.
I think that's one of the reasons that that I have become a little more prescriptive. That one of the reasons that I'm friends with folks like Tim Ferriss and people who are productivity or hacker experts. And I think why those communities have overlapped. We're both friends with Tim. One of Tim's great hacks is if you want to, for Tim, it's probably like get down to 10% body fat or one of his hacks. That if you don't do it, you've written a check, say, to the political opposition for some amount that would be extremely painful. You do the same thing. You put that in an envelope, and if by X date you haven't reached this, then that check goes into the mail to the political opponent.
A huge part of success is this stuff. Yeah. By the way, we never talk about it because it's
that's
weird.
kind of why I'm here.
It's weird. It's not like directly, logically correlated with the project you're working on. Yeah. But we are just, as you said, psychological beings, and we are at the mercy of what our minds tell us. And we know that we are. I love Seth Godin, his framework around like the lizard brain. Yeah. And how there's this ancestral part of our brain that is always making us recoil from anything that is not familiar. And we will always find a reason to not engage with something that is risky, that is really more of a long-term bold project. Yeah. We will always kind of recoil to what's familiar and safe and completely unextraordinary. And so it's just so important that we, press ourselves and trick ourselves.
What are some of Seth's hacks for that? Do you remember? We've had him on the show. If you haven't watched that show, you should go back. He's so smart about that.
Yeah, he really is, and he has such a good, simple way of making the case that we just have to kind of push ourselves and manage. What he likes to call the dip. And I've always, he's been a mentor of mine over the years, and I find it always a helpful reminder to myself.
So talented. So we've been thank you.
Yeah,
your vision for being able to help, I'll say us, we in the creative community navigate these challenges. Yeah. It's like you've come along and you've provided an operating system for so many of us. But let's talk about you personally for a second. That's another thing I didn't find a lot of on the internet. You're very good at talking about a lot of things that are out there and analyzing and providing structure and framework. And it's the goal of this show for people to hear or learn something about you that they can't find anywhere else. So rather than me being prescriptive and trying to pry that one thing open, like what are, if folks looked under the hood or into Scott Belsky's life, what are some of the things that they would find that they would be surprised to find?
Let's see. Let's dissect my own brain for a moment. I think that I engage with too many things. So I'm always trying to, my struggles are things like saying no. A lot of people probably say this, but I am a optimist. And, I think that it's great to always see the potential of a person or a product or an opportunity, but that also has a lot of negative repercussions as well. I mean, first of all, as an investor or a poker player, you are always supposed to be folding. You're always supposed to be seeing what is wrong or what is not going to work. And so that's not natural to me. Like, I push myself to be better at that always.
I'm a terrible poker player.
Right, because I'm always like, I can make these cards work,
Same.
I'm going to get this card, and then this is going to happen, and this is going to happen. And I think there's a gift for being able to think that way. But I also think it's just a tremendous liability. And so what we're all trying to do as human beings, right, is embrace the things that we're good at, but complement the things that we're bad at with some other discipline that is not native, right, not natural to us. That creative's compromise is something that I deal with myself. So, that's something I'm always trying to be better at. Also, like when it comes to fiercely defending your time, it's just like time is just so like, redundant and cliche at this point, but gosh, like it's a never-ending struggle to be able to focus on the things that you believe will make the greatest impact and are most important to you. And for me also now, that's family too.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Thank you. I have two little kids now, and they're it's the things you took for granted obviously before. I also believe that they make you more productive too, because the time you have for your work is even more precious.
You put them down for a nap and you have X. You have an hour.
You have a window. So it's but it's also a new realm of excuses that you could bring into your life as to why you're not making progress on things. So I think it's important to just be honest with yourself and to compartmentalize the time you want to spend on your work, and then also truly be present, with your family. I think also around the role of like struggle in childhood and how that impacts kind of your work later on. I have a younger sister I have two younger sisters. The middle one, who's a few years younger than I am, when she was born, and I was probably 4 or 5 years old, she lost oxygen when she was born, and for some period of time, and what we didn't know at the time but soon learned was that it would really became like a real impairment, in her development, and she was not able to talk for many years, and she was always like a constant concern for my family. Reasonably so.
Of course.
And as a result, I was kind of, I had this like very, independent zone of being on my own to some extent, from some age young. And my parents were always there for me and when I needed them, but there was this kind of, on your own type of feel, which I think developed me in great ways to some extent, but also is always like that sort of left a lot of weird stuff that I will always reconcile with, including my relationship with her, but also the angst and like what is motivating me and why and all these other things. And it's one of those things that I'm trying to. You asked me like personally and like things I think about but I don't talk about. I'm always thinking like, what is the role of struggle in a creative's life? I think it's common that you hear, from people that have embarked on kind of creative careers that they're driven by some struggle. A friend of mine from high school, Rachel Platten, who's a pop star now. She wrote that song, Fight Song, and like all these other sort of
you went to high school with
radio common. Yeah, so Rachel and I were friends in high school, and we were in an a cappella group traveling together I don't know how I made the cut for this a cappella group.
I'm going to sing here in a second.
But she, I remember, I watched her career, over the time that she was, and really like 10 years of just struggling and making it, trying to take any kind of gig she could get. And these were all, I always felt like a lot of the songs, were just poppy and light and whatever. And she wasn't really cutting through. And then it was only at this like really bad point, 10 years in, where she was about to give up and like throw in the towel, where she wrote this song, Fight Song, which was just like a guttural, honest call to rallying cry, and it became her major hit that hit the top of the charts. And it was, came from like a bad place. That's common.
Yeah.
And so in some ways we have to, over the course of our lives, figure out and reconcile, those bad places that we've been at and or are still at, and pull great stuff from them, and learn to live with them and somewhat, reconcile them.
Well, that's part of the show, is helping people understand that these huge, colossal boulders in each of our lives, they're both incredibly, they're so weighty and they can bring us down, but they're also something that we can stand on, and that the juxtaposition of those two things. And a mutual friend of ours, Ryan Holiday, he's also been on the show, book called The Obstacle is the Way.
Yeah.
Stoic philosophy. A, the book is awesome. B, but conceptually, the thing that in the struggle, that's often the thing that can be our differentiator.
Yeah.
So,
here's what I'm always wondering though, is like, should we want to actually overcome the struggles, like really truly conquer them? Like, where will we be if we do that?
Where's the energy?
Yeah.
What happens if you win? Does the energy dissipate?
And I guess maybe life always offers a struggle.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just about finding it and capitalizing on it. Maybe it's like, whether there's a lot of it or a little of it, the potency of it is so great that if like harnessed like kryptonite, you can like, get all the power you need. I don't know.
So I'm going to shift gears, because I want to know, and I think the world wants to know a little bit about, again, came from Goldman, founded a company, worked as a creator with creators, built something up that is now a piece of cultural literacy, to have a portfolio and to talk about the creator in all of us. It was, I would say 5 years basically ahead of CreativeLive, and it's in the community aspect, but now very, very aligned with what you guys are working on or have worked on. You founded a couple of other things. You went to work at Adobe, which I found interesting as a part of your transition through the acquisition. What was it like going from being your own boss to inside a machine, if you're a big publicly, 50 billion, whatever market cap company? Was it empowering because you had resources? Was it stifling? And, help us understand what that journey is like for you, and maybe we can extrapolate and see what it would like for the rest of us.
Sure. The experience of coming in, and I actually stayed for over 3 years, at Adobe, really exceeded my expectations. I was worried that this big company and the bureaucracy and an assumption that there's this politics and whatever that comes along with it would really like kind of dampen my spirit. On the contrary, I got kind of riled up by the opportunity. The thing I loved about the people that work at Adobe is that, yes, it's a big company. There might be some complacency as being a big company, but the truth is they're all there because they want to make creative tools.
Yeah.
It's a lot of them could go other places if they wanted to, but there's this gravity around we're creating like the tools that people used to create in the world. And there are a lot of designers and product managers and other leaders that take that super seriously. Yeah. And so it was fun to really get alignment across them and a lot of the other executives to push a few things forward. I mean, one of the things that I was asked to lead there, aside from Behance and those efforts, was mobile creativity. At the time that I got there were like a dozen different apps that all butchered the names of the desktop tools, like Photoshop, that had no compatibility with each other or with the desktop tools.
I remember.
Were like these $1.99, kind of crappy apps on the App Store. Because they were experiments, right? And it's fine like that, but that wasn't really where the world was going. Now the company was a cloud business. All the products had some cloud connectivity, and there was this opportunity to actually bridge mobile creativity and desktop creativity that no one had really tackled yet. And so I was given that sort of challenge, and it was actually a team of nothing. There were, it was sort of like build a new team to build this kind of mobile creativity vision. And so starting from zero, and then I engaged a seasoned vice president of engineering, this guy named Govind, and then Eric Snowden, who was a designer at Behance from Atlantic Records, who joined and became kind of our lead designer. And then the team kind of grew from there, and it became an org of hundreds of people that were building all of these products on top of what we called the Creative SDK, which was a technology that enabled the desktop tools and the mobile tools to work together in unison. And you could kind of capture patterns and colors and shapes as vector objects and pull them in on Illustrator. I mean, there are all these kind of really cool things that we found in the lab and brought to see the light of day. And you can't do that at a small company. Yeah. You can't just easily get a double-digit $1 million budget to build something like this that actually impacts how the creative world works.
Yeah, and impacts millions and millions of people. Like
right.
You get scale so quickly.
You get scale.
Yeah.
But you have to be willing to roll up your sleeves and tackle the day-to-day debates.
Yeah.
And I found that I was strangely enjoyed the process of taking on sort of the ancestral thinking in the company and working with a lot of my colleagues there who just wanted to make this happen. Mm-hmm. So it's really come along quite well. And one of those moments was when Apple launched their iPad Pro. And I was tasked also with rebuilding the Apple relationship because I had a few relationships there. And as you know from like the Flash Wars, the Apple Adobe relationship was not in the greatest spot. Yeah. And so it was so great to rekindle that relationship and ultimately have our team represented in the keynote for the iPad Pro launch, where we were showing the power of these new apps on this device. And so we were in the demos, where we were practicing it with the whole Apple executive team and stuff. And it was one of those moments where it's like, wow, like we built this from the ground up. There was zero mobile strategy. Now we've kind of brought Apple and Adobe back together and are debuting this vision on stage. And so it was a great experience. And I left from that thinking, I could imagine coming in and leading a big company as well as a startup again. Like, I'm not sure what I want to do, but I have an affinity for both.
Well, I don't know. I launched Photoshop Touch for Adobe at Max on stage with this then CTO Kevin Lynch.
Yeah, sure.
And were you a part of the company at that point? It was right.
I think that was before I joined. So that was probably like early 2012 or 2011.
Yeah,
or something.
It was probably right in that window.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like the opportunities to do stuff at scale as a creator. I think this is another thing, if I can send a message to the folks at home. Every chapter of your career, and it's really obvious with yours, and just how Goldman led to building a business with being a creator, working with and for other creators. When that chapter closed, this other one opened. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a hard thing for folks to see. It was even hard in my own career, like with CreativeLive, for example. You go from managing your little team of hustler, photo creator folks to having an opportunity to tap something at scale. Is that just true at the upper end of the scale when you're a company builder, or what does that look like for individual creators? What have you seen?
It's funny. Like one of the principles I really ascribe to. And I really also say this from my own experience, but also with a lot of my friends who are individual creative professionals or freelancers or whatever, is that a labor of love always pays off. Maybe not as you would expect, but it just does. If you stick with it long enough and you are authentically doing what you love to do, it just has a way. Because perhaps you have this gravity around you to pull in people that respect the fact that you're pursuing something that you love so much, and then some other opportunity comes up and people are like, wow, he's so passionate and he's truly an authentic individual pursuing what he or she loves. Yeah. And so I want to bet on that person, or I want to hire that person, or whatever. All these stories end differently than people would have thought they would, but a labor of love just has a way of paying off.
It's infectious.
It is. Which is why I always encourage people to incrementally in their career take opportunities that bring you closer to that overlap of your skills, what genuinely interests you, and whatever opportunities are presenting themselves, like that, the overlap of those three things is really where you want to be. And if you can just get incrementally closer to that, what you don't want to do, what a lot of people do, is they take a step away from that for a bigger paycheck. So it's like, oh, well, I'm getting this opportunity here, or I'm picking between two jobs. One of them is a little bit more what I want to do. The other one is like better pay. I'm just going to do that for a while and rationalize to myself why that's a good decision. Just doesn't end up working.
That's gold right there. That's gold. So it's critical that we touch on you as an investor, because I think that's it's, from what I understand, it's an amazing gift that you've either had or developed.
Or luck.
Yeah, but I think there is a message in there that timing is everything, and it is very much around about who you surround yourself with. If you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, who you're spending time with, and does that create in part opportunities? Just to recap, been early in Uber, in Pinterest, in name 5 others, and tell us about it.
Sure. I think I try to make sense of it myself, because I became an accidenter relatively by accident. It was 2010. I was still an entrepreneur of a bootstrap business, having no business investing in other people's businesses. But I was introduced to Ben Silberman, who's the co-founder and CEO of Pinterest. And he was working on a product that was also a grid like Behance, and had a real affinity towards designers. And he really wanted to over-index on the role of design at Pinterest. And I just have an obsession with product. I mean, for those who've worked with me before, they just know I'm a product thinker more than anything else. I love thinking about the onboarding experiences of a product, and what the defaults are, and how to make a product, for example, put the people's work before the brand of the product, and how to, what are the structures. And I mean, I love thinking through product problems.
Yeah.
And so when I met him and was just kind of like jumping in and getting my hands dirty with what he was building, he asked me if I wanted to be an advisor. And he was also raising a seed round, and so I was like, okay, I'll do some sort of advisory role.
Pinterest as a seed round.
Yeah, and I got in.
Conceptually, it doesn't.
So and so when you do that, Uber was I was working again bootstrapping Behance. We had a partnership with StumbleUpon, which was a company that had recently been bought back from eBay by Garrett Camp. And when we were one day in my office, which was also my home at the time, in New York, he was showing me a sketch that he had actually done on one of our notebooks that we were selling to creative professionals to bootstrap ourselves. And it was like a sketch of like this livery service thing, this mobile app. And I said, do you want to help out? I was like, dude, you're a CEO. You just bought back your company and you're trying to make it. I'm an entrepreneur struggling to make it and bootstrapping my business. What the hell are we talking about?
This other third love here.
Stay focused. That was my wisdom that I tried to impart with him. Fortunately, he didn't listen. So the opportunity to be an advisor, and then an investor in his company. And so over the years, it's been other teams of people that I really love, that I feel like are solving something the world needs, or creating something the world needs. That have a product that I have an affinity towards, a problem that I want to partake in. Another example was Periscope. I really jumped in deep with these guys, with Joe and Kayvon, and became almost like a de facto part of that team, which was so much fun, because I really believed in what they were trying to do. And with the opportunity to come into Twitter, I actually remained an advisor and signed on an advisory deal with Twitter just to stay involved with that team and the product, because I cared so much about it. So I'm not a thematic investor. I'm by no means a financial investor. I'm not like scrutinizing their cash flow analyses and their projections and all that stuff. I am a product investor. I'm a people investor, and I also really believe that technology, can help build communities and empower people, and I just love partaking in those journeys. So those are, and all my investments haven't worked out well.
Yeah.
When you invest in super passionate teams trying to do crazy things, a lot of them end up as struggling and trying to find their way and stuck in the middle forever. But it's been fun and it's been rewarding, and I even for a short period of time said I should just be a full-time investor.
Yes.
What I realized doing that was I just missed being able to jump in with a product team for however period of time I want to.
Yeah.
I just wanted to have a little bit more autonomy in being able to focus on a new team like I am with Prefer right now, and then maybe do some investments and then jump in on something else. So I realized that as an investor, I just needed that flexibility in order to be happy.
So 2 points there. One, is it fair to say that I'm trying to make the connection that most of the experiences that you've had as a successful investor, to me, and for the audience, it's less about the actual investing and more about the people, the communities that you keep, and are you pursuing your interests and commingling with like-minded people who are doing cool shit, in this case, building products. Is it fair to say that that you were over-indexing on people and products?
Yeah, over-indexing on people and products, and and then letting my weakness for extreme optimism help me forecast like where could this potentially be, how can I get excited about it.
Yeah.
And again, like it's the negative is that there's a lot of like stark realities that hit the business really quickly that most investors would run away from. I just get masochistically interested, and want to say like, screw that, like let's take this on. Let's figure out how to turn this around. They're saying that that's like a bad business model. Let's prove them wrong. They're saying that that's not a good go-to-market. Let's see if maybe they're completely wrong. Like I love that, and that's why also I love the early stage. The early stage of a company is when there's more of a, it's more of a clean slate. You can question some massive assumptions, and it's less of like the later stage iteration optimization of a business model. Yeah,
sort of a builder versus an optimizer mentality. Okay, so that was thing one. Thing two is you talked very briefly about you had a stint as an actual investor where that was your job, and it was with Benchmark, and you were hired. It's a huge deal to get hired on at Benchmark. It's one of the only firms that I know of where you're a partner, you share equally with all the other partners. Usually there's a big structure and hierarchy, and then you left 7 months later to become, or you just like slightly extracted yourself to become a venture partner, which for the parlance is basically you're connected to the firm, you can bring deals in, but you're not like
on the hook to do all the investments.
And so was this, the question is, was this that same paradigm you described earlier where you decided paycheck over passion?
It was one of those
did it come back to
things,
bite you in the ass, or how do you look at it?
It was a good lesson and learning point for me because I love the team there. I think that they're, as an investor in a venture capital fund, like there's no other fund I'd rather be invested in. And there was a part of me that was saying, well, since you've been a good investor, you should be doing this full time. And I almost submitted myself to like society's expectations of what you should do given the opportunity, rather than what you would want to do, despite the opportunity. And it was just one of those really like big learning points for me. I knew very quickly, in that full-time traditional venture capital role, that this was just like not a perfect fit. And then, but there was a big side of me that was just saying, make it work, man.
Yeah, but so few people get the chance to do this.
Yeah.
For me, it was pro sports. Going to play professional soccer.
Okay.
So everyone's like, "Oh my God, of course!" Well, it's just so obvious. If you can, you're just going to go do this.
Right.
And you had to deal with that. You had to figure it out.
It was tough, and I think that it took months of sort of triangulation of like, why am I not feeling this fit, and what's going on, and also like I really have so much respect for the team, and I actually. And I get the benefits of being a part of a firm like that. And fortunately for me, the team was like, well, what role do you want to play? They said, go in a Quip doc and like write up, like what would the role look like? And so I took a stab at it. And they said, great. There was like no negotiation or...
But if that's not a lesson right there, that you literally can write your own script, despite the societal pressure.
If you build the right relationships, if you are honest and transparent and... and I think in my case to my team there was like, I think I will add more value in this role, and I think they agreed, and I also knew that then I would get the flexibility and the autonomy and the other things that kind of have always been part of my creative essence. So I it was a great outcome from a difficult process. But it shows you that at any stage in life, you can succumb to like the pressures of what people think you should do. and the spotlight of seduction, I like to call it, from like a great opportunity that may not actually be 100% aligned with what you love doing every day. And it's easier said than done. When you're in the thick of it, it's super hard to do that. I remember how hard it was to extract myself out of that Goldman job I had out of college. Here I just like landed on Wall Street because back in like the late 90s, early 2000s, when you wanted to go into business of any kind, what did you do? You went to Wall Street and cut your teeth, as an East Coaster. That's what you did. That's all you did. And I remember realizing like this is not where I should be, but I still struggled to extract myself because it's comfortable. People are like, oh, this is like a great job. Wow. Like, it's hard to extract yourself from that. Yeah. But I think that's part of what you have to do as a builder is be willing to, I love how Jeff Bezos always says, you have to be willing to be misunderstood for long periods of time. And that starts with just initially making a step that no one understands. And learning to gain confidence from the doubt that you're getting.
So smart. That little nugget of wisdom that will stand alone for a long time. So I want to be mindful of our time. I want to go into a little bit of a speed round.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So how important is design thinking, growth mindset for not just individuals, but huge teams? And how do you think about it?
Yeah, well, I think that the design term, the design thinking term is thrown around a lot, right? Yeah. But I think that we both agree it is really about thinking about your business and your communications and how you merchandise strategy to your team and progress to your team in a design-minded way. It's no one reads documents. No one has time to read business plans. They're static from the moment they're written. Sometimes a quick diagram or a nice, pithy way of merchandising to your team or to your customers, what it is you're doing and why, can go way further than anything else. And that's the design problem, is tackling that and boiling it all down. So I love thinking about problems that way, and which is also why I believe that designers make great co-founders or founders, and also having a design leader, have a seat at the table is almost like a given at this point.
Yeah.
And I also question companies that outsource design at this point. I get pitches all the time from businesses founded by business people or technologists that sort of outsource all their design to third parties. And it's like, if that's what you're going to compete with, like, how could you do that?
Yeah, look at all the most successful companies of certainly the past 25 years. But you could argue longer. They had design as Apple is a really easy thing to point at,
100%.
But it's a core functionality that they have in the organization. Speaking of core, let's go to tools.
Yeah.
Some of the tools that you use, you mentioned, QuipDoc, you've already dropped a couple things, little nuggets throughout, but is there just a list of, like, if you think through your day, what are some of the tools that you use?
Yeah, through the day, I'm using Slack with different teams that I'm involved with. I love Wunderlist as a task management tool, which will eventually, I guess, migrate to Microsoft's task management application. We'll see how I feel about that. Evernote. I still use as a way to store content, and just and I'm a big proponent of just getting shit out of your mind and storing it away so you can just have the aperture open for other things or whatever you're focused on at a given point in time. So I am always trying to capture everything and file it away. And I also think that a lot of these thoughts are like fine wine. You just kind of store it away. It accrues value over time. It becomes more interesting. You keep coming back to it and touching it again, and then it becomes your next, big project.
How important to you are habits, and do you have some daily habits that it's like brushing your teeth, you don't leave the house without it?
Yeah. I don't have, well, I do brush my teeth every day.
You have a couple habits, yeah.
I'm not, I don't have too many of those habits. I guess I'm anchored by the actionable stuff. I'm certainly anchored by a calendar, and I schedule my time wisely, and I also leave these like windows of non-stimulation to focus on stuff rather than just always be reacting to whatever's coming into to me or whatever I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
But I have not indoctrinated like many habitual time-driven things I have to do.
But even managing your time isn't perhaps like the world's best known, it's the best known tool or habit is
Yep.
is habitually protecting time for the things that you find value in. If like you get, what's it, El Luna, you get what you must have, not what you should have.
Totally. And when you're going into something and you're like, why am I doing this? And you're starting to feel that bout of frustration, like, why is my time being spent doing this? Using that to like correct decisions going forward. I mean, sometimes I'll email my assistant and just be like, I should not have done this. Like, don't let me do this again. Just because this is not going to push anything forward for me.
Yeah.
And I was just trying to be nice and trying to say yes and like just hold me accountable.
Yeah. The role of diversity and inclusion.
Yeah.
In building products and companies, and I guess just the basis for human empathy.
Tell you, I think all the time about this now. And there are the logical reasons why diversity is super important, like making sure that the team you're making decisions with reflects the customer base and having people from different experiences, around the table who pull from different places. And I think all of those things are very important. But the thing that I think is most important about diversity that is talked about a little less is how you think at the edge of reason. How you get to the point where you're almost being unreasonable in how something might be accomplished or what should be done, or it's the stuff that is explored and discussed and argued at the edge of reason that I think makes the greatest impact in a product, in a company, in an industry. And so if you surround yourself with people that are perfectly reasonable, and groupthink makes people reasonable. Groupthink kind of brings us down to the lowest common denominator. When everyone around the table is trying to decide and get to something that everyone agrees with, that's when we land on something completely unremarkable. And so how do you keep thinking at the edge of reason and prevent yourself from just acquiescing to the mean, regressing to the mean? I think is having people around you that are just different than you, and really will think of things completely out of left field and at the edge of reason as to what is reasonable to me, right? Yeah. And the only way of fostering an environment that achieves that outcome is just to actually try to get people that on paper would likely think differently. I mean, yes, their gender and background and ethnicity and socioeconomic experience and all these things are actually, these cultural differences are maybe shortcuts to trying to build a team that is likely to have that happen. But I get frustrated when people just see it as like biological checkboxes because it's really a strategy. Yeah. I mean, this is freaking strategy. It's important. And that's what you have to realize when there are a lot of teams that have been able to do that time and time again and keep pulling shit out of out of the ether that makes these products more interesting. It's because they are surrounded by people that are not regressing to the mean and are willing to be independent thinkers and see things completely differently.
So powerful. We've talked about you as an author, writing books, like Making Ideas Happen. We've talked about your journey from Wall Street to Silicon Valley. We've talked about some personal stuff. To me, that's all. That's a beautiful story looking backwards. That's one of the ways you can, one of the few ways you can connect the dots, right? But why don't you, before we leave here, tell us about what's next? Where are you going? Where should we be looking for you? Besides your name and lights again and again.
I don't know. I think that
we know your coordinates. We can put that in.
Sure.
We don't need to burn time on that. But what do you? I mean, is it prefer? What else is?
Well, I'm spending my time, with a number of different smaller companies. As an investor and advisor. Prefer is one of the biggest commitments I have now because I'm actually a co-founder of this business. And I really care about the team. I think it's an exceptional team, and it's a big problem. It's just like the future of the economy and not having too many independent professionals, which is the largest sector of the economy, commoditized, right? So I'm really fascinated about that problem. And Prefer is an expression of how to solve it potentially, right? So I focused a lot on that. I'm focused on also a new project chronicling what I like to call the journey in between, or the messy middle of entrepreneurs' journeys. I feel like we spend too much time focused on the starts and finishes of everything, and glamorizing the starts and finishes. And whether the finish is an IPO, an acquisition, or a bankruptcy, it gets all the fanfare and the headlines. But how about everything in between? the endurance and the optimization.
Yeah, that's
required.
that 90% doing part that I
Totally.
like about the 10% dreaming and planning. That's the beginning, and at
Right.
the end, how am I going to dunk the ball when you're 2 inches away from the basket?
Yeah.
That's not really all that complicated. It's the messy middle is your
Right.
term I've read before. So you're focused on.
I want to really understand that better, and I want to help glamorize some of the middle tactics that would otherwise just be overlooked.
Yeah.
I think that anonymity, that mining this mundane middle, no one knows and gives a shit about what you're doing, is both a blessing and a bitch, right? You can do all sorts of great things because no one's paying attention, but only because no one cares. And I think it's a lonely place. I would love to, as entrepreneurs say, like, what was it like to work with Scott? Like, I would aspire to have them say that he was more helpful in the middle. Not just the product stuff, which I've been doing for some time, but also just managing that middle. And so I'm actually inscribing a lot of what I'm learning in that area. I'm doing interviews, and that's another side project I'm focused on right now.
Yeah.
So we'll see, but it's I feel like I'm in my zone now in terms of what I want to be doing and how I should be spending my time, and have a lot to learn, which is a good place to be.
Thank you so
Thanks for
much
having
for
me.
being here.
Yeah,
Really appreciate
absolutely.
it, bud.
Thanks, Jason.
Folks at home, I hope you took notes because there's a lot of information in there. We'll see you again probably